today's presentation, and it will be available on our YouTube channel. Our goal is within a week to have that up there for you on our playlist, and we have a slide about that at the end. And Shannon will be sending out a link to the recording once it is available. And if you do need to minimize the screen for any reason, or if you accidentally minimize us, we will remain on your screen in kind of a smaller thumbnail version. And if you want to go back to full screen mode, you just click this exit minimized video button, and that should take care of that. So one last thing before we jump into today's presentation is we have a poll question for you. It's just super quick. If you guys do not see the poll question on your screen, I will read it out loud and you can type in your response in the chat. So I'm going to open that up for you. So again, you should see the poll question up on your screen. If you don't, we're just simply asking how many people are watching from your location right now, just so Shannon and I can get a better idea of how many people we're reaching. So if it's just you, you can say 1. If it's you and someone else, you can put 2, so on and so forth. So just let us know, or again, by answering the poll, or type your response in the chat. So most of you responded. I'll give you a few more seconds to indicate your response, and then we will hand it over to Shannon. Okay. So we are going to kick it off now with, again, our last webinar of our series on owls. And so I am going to now hand it over to Shannon so we can all learn about these awesome creatures. Shannon, take it away.
Thank you, Lara, and thank you everyone for tuning in today on this Memorial Day to learn about owls in Florida. As Lara mentioned, my name is Shannon Carnevale, and I'm so excited to talk to you about owls today. We're going to go ahead and get started. All right, so some of the things we're going to learn about today are an owl's role in the ecosystem, the common species that we have here in Florida, and also how you as a resident or a visitor to the state of Florida can help conserve and protect our owls and their amazing benefits to society and to our ecosystem. And who wouldn't want to try and help that amazing critter right there? So we're going to go ahead and get started and learn about owls. So the most important thing, if you take nothing else away from this webinar, is that owls are amazing raptors, which means they are predators that hunt primarily from the sky. And so these raptor species are critically important to our ecosystem and maintaining balance in the food web. And they do that through their diet. So most owls, what they go after or what their prey is largely dependent on their size. So the owl that you see in the picture on your screen and behind me here in my background is the great horned owl. He's very large. And so our large owls like to eat things like rodents, small mammals, snakes, songbirds, anything that they can really catch. Some owls are thought to actually hunt fish that are near the surface of the water. That's amazing. And I can't wait to see that one day, but I've yet to see it in person. And then we have some small owls in Florida also. And our small owls really like to prey on insects, large and small, things like grasshoppers, cockroaches, spiders. They'll go after earthworms, frogs, lizards, small snakes if they can get them. But the important thing to remember is that as a predator species, they're going to go after whatever they can get. This just makes up the majority of their diet. Rodent populations are something that we as a society really care about. They can cause a lot of human disease. They can bring a lot of filth to society based on their foraging habits and their nesting habits. And in general, people don't like having rodents all over the place. So owls are really important in maintaining that rodent population. UF IFAS Extension and UF IFAS Research have research going on in the Everglades agricultural area and have been doing research in that area on the effect owls have on rodent populations for over a decade now. And this research is indicating that a single pair of barn owls who are nesting and raising young can eat almost 3,000 rodents per breeding season. Or 3,000 rodents per breeding season. And that research of overall diet indicates that 56% of their diet are made up of various species of rats. And so if you can imagine how many owls they have in the Everglades agricultural area, which is quite numerous, every breeding season, they're reducing the rodent population by at least 3,000 per pair. And so you can imagine in society how much more of a rodent problem areas might have if they don't have owls. If they currently don't have owls, some of our conservation recommendations that we'll talk about later can perhaps help to bolster the population in those areas. So we're going to watch a quick video on YouTube. This video is called Experiment, How Does an Owl Fly So Silently? And it's from an amazing BBC documentary that I do recommend if you are interested in owls. And this is going to demonstrate why they are so effective as a raptor species, as a predator. Oh, all right.
Good girl.
So what you're watching here is the comparative noise that various species make when they fly.
And now, it's Kenza's turn.
So the first species that flew by was your average pigeon. That was followed by a falcon. I don't remember which species it was. And then the third was our beautiful barn owl. And so if you listen to those three flight patterns, the owl was almost silent. And because of that silence, they are very, very skilled at hunting at night. They can sneak up on their prey, and they are very effective at doing that. They're often known as the silent predator. Okay. So we're going to start with a poll question here. I'm going to go ahead and ask Lara to please pull that poll question up. And that poll is, how many owl species call Florida home year-round? Put another way, how many resident owl species call Florida home? All right, and we're getting a good number of people to respond to that poll question. We'll give you just a couple more seconds. And if you are on a mobile device, there's a chance that the poll questions are not going to work for you. We do know that that is an issue. But if you are able to do the poll questions, please feel free to. Okay, Lara, that's probably pretty good. All right. So the answer to this poll question is 5. We have 5 resident owl species that call Florida home year-round. And those species are the barred owl, the barn owl, the great horned owl, and then our smaller owls, which are our burrowing owl and eastern screech owl. A lot of people get the barred owl and barn owl confused if they're not familiar with our species, often thinking that it's just people mispronouncing the name of one species. They are actually 2 species, and we're going to learn about them in just a moment. But the first one we're going to learn about is the great horned owl. This owl, when mature, will stand 18 to 25 inches tall, and it's really what most people think of when you talk about a storybook owl or an animated owl, the quintessential owl. And so most people, if you say, hey, there's an owl in this story, this is the owl they're going to picture, unless they are really familiar with some of our other species. It's pretty easy to identify this owl in Florida. It has these large yellow eyes, and I'm going to turn on my laser pointer real quick. So it'll have these large yellow eyes. That yellow-eyed stare is really easy to see from afar. And depending on where they're perched, you can see these large ear tufts that they have. They're little feather clumps that stick straight up on their head, and they look like horns or like large ears. And so that is how they get their name, the great horned owl. And from a distance, you can tell these guys apart. In this top picture here, you have a young great horned owl, and they just look like really fluffy footballs with big orange eyes, and they are absolutely adorable. Whenever you have a park that has great horned owl nestlings in an area where a lot of people can see them, you're often going to find a lot of photographers interested in taking their picture. They're quite charismatic. So the great horned owl is throughout the state of Florida and actually North America. It has the most diverse diet of any of our North American raptors. This is one of the owls that, when I mentioned some might fish as well, the great horned owl is one of them. They are diverse enough in their diet that they will eat other owls if they can get a hold of them. And so our other owls, like our barred owl, they often have ranges which overlap. If a family of barred owls sees a horned owl come into their area, they will often choose another area to go to their roost to avoid becoming the next meal of the great horned owl. And we are going to listen to the sound of them real quick. But first, we have a picture that Lara took. This is from afar, and you can see a nest of a great horned owl that has two little owlets in it, fledglings, and then the mature owl sitting right here. And you can see from a distance even how obvious those ear tufts would be. This is an owl that you might hear all over Florida, and this is what they sound like. If I can click on them. So what you hear here are a couple chattering back and forth. All right. The next species we're going to talk about is the barred owl. And the barred owl gets its name from the bars across its chest right here. This little guy is a little frazzled up, and so his bars aren't quite vertical, but they do look like vertical bars going down the chest. It's a white chest with vertical brown mottled bars. And if you notice, they are a very similar size to the great horned owl, but they are really easy to tell apart because they do not have those bright yellow eyes and they do not have ear tufts at all. So if you see this barred owl in a tree, you can see no ear tufts and that really dark stare with a yellow beak. So even from afar, these large owls are pretty similar or pretty easy to tell apart from your great horned owl. You can identify them by that mottled brown and white color, the bars across the chest, as we mentioned, and they also have a range throughout Florida. They are highly diverse in what landscape they like. You can find them in forested areas. They're very common in urban parks and suburban parks. We've got one in the park right down the street from my house that just likes to hang out and look for little things to eat. It also eats a variety of rodents and other birds, anything in that size range that is appropriate for them. This is a very common owl for people to hear rather than see. So most of our owls in Florida, although we have quite large populations of all of them, our human population doesn't get to see them very frequently. Since they are predominantly active at night, you're more likely to hear them around dawn or dusk than you might see them during the day. And this one, people like to say, it sounds like it's saying, who cooks for you, who cooks for you all. And we'll listen to that right now. if you have heard that call in your area, I'd like you to go ahead and open up your participant window and raise your hand if you can. And then we can get a feel for how many people are familiar with that barred owl call. Oh, wow, so many of you. That's fantastic. If I had to throw an estimate on it, I would say about a third of you have heard that call. So that's great to hear. This is one that's less common in urban settings. Our barn owl is the owl pictured here. And you'll notice he has a much different look than some of the other owls we've just talked about. He has a bright white face that almost has a heart shape to it. You can see that right here. The way that the barn owl hunts, the way that all of our owls hunt, is they use this face shield. It's kind of like a satellite dish, and they hone in on the sound of their prey rustling through the grass or moving through the vegetation. And the barn owl is especially adapted at this. These owls like big open fields. They are readily living and hunting in agricultural areas like the research we were talking about earlier. And they really like anywhere that has a lot of rodents. And so these can be great owls to invite to your area with artificial habitat, which we'll talk about in a little bit, because of their predation. So they are slightly smaller than the other two owls we spoke about already today. They stand about 14 to 21 inches tall when they are mature. They have that white heart-shaped face with dark eyes. They have a off-white or pinkish white beak, so they don't have that dark beak or the yellow. And they have a lighter color overall, so they will have a light colored chest that might have some black or gray spotting on it. And then from behind, it has this beautiful tawny brown coloration to it. Overall, they're a really gorgeous owl to see. They also have very long legs that you can see when they're flying and when they are perched. And so their range is also throughout the state of Florida, but like I said, this is going to be in areas that have wide open spaces, large fields, pastures, agricultural row crops, things of that nature. Now in their range, if prey is abundant, they will nest very close to each other. They do not have large territories like the great horned owl or the barred owl might have, and they don't regularly defend those territories either. They will nest fairly close to each other, assuming that there is enough food to go around. They've even been known to take up residence in old barns, and you would have several breeding pairs in the same barn if there is enough rodents to go around. They predominantly roost in tree cavities or in old buildings, hence the name barn owl. This is one of the reasons that they do take well to artificial nest habitat. Now these barn owls, as amazing as they are, all the predator benefits that we've already talked about, there are a lot of urban myths and cultural superstitions around these owls, and you're going to find out why in just a moment. Having these around really is a blessing in disguise because of all of the good they do. But when you hear this call I'm about to play, you will understand why they do have a reputation and superstition for being bad luck. So take a listen. So if you imagine being in an old abandoned barn or doing your chores outside or, you know, hiking or camping, and you hear that screech come through the trees, it would be very haunting. And that's why they have that, that bad luck connotation. But assuming you don't hold that belief, these are wonderful critters to have around. The fourth owl we're going to talk about today is one of our smaller owls. And this is one of the most common owls that people will see in residential areas from my experience. They stand about 6 to 9 inches tall. They are Florida's smallest owl at that 6 inches, and that is mature height. This hand on the right that you see right here, this is a Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission picture. So this is someone who is holding a rehab animal. You can tell because he's got a tassel here holding him in place. But this is a full-grown, mature owl. He is teeny tiny, just slightly larger than the biologist's hand that is holding them. When you are trying to identify these owls, it's easy to note that they do have the ear tufts of our great horned owl. These are, in emails to me, often mistaken for the young of a great horned owl because they look so similar to them, but in pint-sized. These are in fact a different species, but they have the bright yellow eyes of the great horned owl, the little horned ear tufts that they have, but their head is abnormally large for the size of their body. And if you're curious what a young owlet of an eastern screechy looks like, this is one right here. This is a photo sent in from someone who watched one of our owl presentations before, Miss Lori Reed, and she gave us permission to use this in this webinar today. And this is a young owlet that has taken up to perching in the palm trees beside her home. So you can see he has little fluffy feathers. He doesn't quite have his mature flight feathers yet, but he's hanging around and is quite easy for the family to see. These can be red, brown, or gray. It will determine somewhat, the color will be determined by geographical area. We do have all three colors in the state of Florida. Some are more common than others in certain areas, but these are, they're all super cute. If you haven't found the one in the bottom picture yet, he is right here using all of his skills to camouflage into this tree cavity that we have here. And so what they'll do is they'll find a tree cavity and they'll kind of back themselves into it and then fluff their feathers up, and that blends them right into the bark of the tree, and it's quite amazing. So if they are in a tree, you are unlikely to see them, but if they're on greenery or in an artificial nest box, you might see them. Because of their tiny stature, these adorable little owls will eat things like grasshoppers and lizards, small frogs. They will eat other songbirds if they can get a hold of them, especially young ones. They need to be quite small though. They'll eat small snakes, crayfish, things like that. And we are going to hear the call of the eastern screech owl. It is often a call that people describe as a high-pitched hoarse neighing. Let's see if you agree. So that adorable noise is our eastern screech owl's most common call. It is worth noting that all of our owls have a variety of songs and calls that they use throughout the year, but these are the ones that most people associate with them. The eastern screech owl, if you have some nearby and you play this call into the backyard in the evening, sometimes they will call back, and that's always really exciting to do. So our last owl species that we're going to talk about today is the Florida burrowing owl. This is a threatened species in the state of Florida, and he stands mature, less than 9 inches tall. You'll notice he looks kind of similar to our eastern screech owl. He's also got those bright yellow eyes and brown mottled coloring. He does not have any ear tufts though. And more often than not, this owl will be found on the ground. So right here in this upper corner, you see a tiny little burrowing owl hanging out near its burrow with a curious cow nearby. And down here you see one hanging out in the entrance of its burrow. These owls do burrow into the ground, just as their name would suggest, and that is where they nest and live year-round. Their range is most of Florida, but they are not very common. That is why they have that threatened species. In areas where they are known to be, they can be quite abundant. So there are some colonies of these little critters all over Southeast Florida. They're very popular online. You can find all kinds of YouTube videos. Call your local Audubon if you're interested in seeing some burrowing owls in person, and they might know where the closest area of the state that you can go see them is. Again, because of their small size, they do predominantly eat things that they can get a hold of, like grasshoppers, mole crickets, cockroaches, insects, frogs, small snakes, things like that. Now, you might be wondering, because of the cows there and them living underground, are cattle an issue for our burrowing owls? Research suggests that this is not a problem for them. While it is true that a cow could step in on top of a burrow and crush it in, they didn't find any significant harm caused to the overall population by that risk. In fact, it's the opposite. In areas that have an abundance of cattle ranching and forage areas for cattle, like this beautiful pasture, burrowing owls can thrive. They don't tend to have a lot of disturbance from people. They're wide open spaces. Burrowing owls do not like a lot of tall vegetation because they cannot see any predators that might be coming to their burrow. So cattle and burrowing owls do really go well together. And this is just one of the wildlife conservation success stories of the agricultural world. Unlike some of our other owls, burrowing owls are very active during the daytime, which is why they are so charismatic when people get to go to some part of the state and see them. And since I don't have an audio clip, we're going to watch a little video that is on YouTube. It's called A Few Minutes with Burrowing Owls, and you'll notice how urban of an area this owl is living in. This is an empty lot in Southeast Florida, I believe, and I mean, there's a house right there. So we're going to listen to his call right here, if I can get my mouse to work. So that is what's known as the burrowing owl's chatter or chuckle. He does sound like he's laughing. And you can see by watching this video just how charismatic they are. They are absolute characters, and people really develop a deep bond for burrowing owls if they live near them. Something that you can see from a wildlife conservation perspective is this PVC pipe next to the burrow. And this is there to mark where the nest is so that there's less chance of human disturbance for these owls. Which leads me to our next subject area here. So owl conservation in Florida. We just learned about our 5 resident species. What are the biggest threats to them? In general, there are 2 major threats, and the first one is a loss of habitat. So one way that you can really help our owls in Florida is leaving large trees even after they die. Now, if you are in an area where it is unsafe to leave a snag, which is another name for a dead standing tree, then you can add artificial nesting habitat to living trees or to poles or things of that nature. But leaving old snags where they can nest in the holes that occur in those trees is a great way to provide habitat and also habitat for their prey species. Anywhere where you have large land clearing due to urbanization can be a problem for these owl species. And then in the case of our ugly duckling barn owl owlets that you see here in the picture, if you see in their nest box there, they do not build a nest for their young. Barn owls will actually just lay their eggs in a pile of torn apart owl pellets and killed prey. So as you can imagine, a buildup of owl pellets and bits and pieces of their last meal, it can get quite stinky. And then if you also think about how they do have a lot of cultural superstitions around them, people will destroy that habitat intentionally at times. So loss of habitat is a big issue for owls. The second biggest issue for owls is going to be accidental poisoning. As we've discussed repeatedly at this point, owls prey a lot on rodents. And so if you are using bait and poison to get rid of a rodent problem in Florida, there is a lot of building research and evidence that that rodent poisoning is actually affecting our birds of prey. And this is not exclusive to owls. This is true of other large raptors like eagles and falcons as well. There was a large study done at Tufts Wildlife Clinic in 2006 through 2010. Of that time, of the species that came in for necropsies, 161 birds were tested for accidental poisoning from rat bait. And of that 161, a mind-boggling 139 of them, or roughly 86%, tested positive for rat poison. And only 9 of those birds had enough of it build up in their system that they were exhibiting symptoms prior to death that led them to being submitted for this type of research. So it is a big problem that we don't really understand a lot about, because testing an owl or another bird of prey is expensive, and in general, we don't want the public picking up a dead bird. So if you see an owl or other bird of prey exhibiting disorientation, a weird amount of being near people, walking around on the ground instead of flying, or other symptoms of rat poison, call your local Florida Fish and Wildlife office and see if, especially if that animal dies in your yard, see if they can find out if it was tested for rodent poisoning. And maybe I can get to my next slide. There we go. So we have one more poll question for you to fill out today. You've heard me mention artificial habitat a couple times now. So all Florida owl species respond well to artificial habitat in their normal ranges. Which artificial habitat structure is the best choice for barn, barred, and eastern screech owls? Your options are nest platforms, nest boxes, T-perches, or artificial burrows. Excellent, and we're getting very quick responses. Good job, everyone. All right, Lara, that's probably pretty good. Thank you. So the majority of you got this question right as well. The answer to this poll question is nest boxes. All three of these species, barn, barred, and eastern screech, are cavity nesters. And of all of our bird species that might occupy an artificial nest box, or in other terms, a bird house, it would be these three owls. They each have their own unique requirements though. So artificial habitat is a great way to help our owl species in Florida. Nest boxes for these three species can provide habitat in an area that would otherwise be too urban for them. What you're looking at on the right here is a nest box that was placed in an agricultural silo, and those little pink, not even really feathered, furry, fluffy things are little hatchlings from a barn owl. Our other species can also benefit from artificial habitat. For the great horned owl, you would need to provide a nesting platform. We'll show you what that looks like in a moment. And then our burrowing owl can have its habitat enhanced, especially in urban areas, if you provide a pipe, which will mimic an artificial burrow, or if you provide observation perches, also known as T-perches. And the purpose for the T-perches is to help them spot predators. All right, so this is an example of a barn owl box in an agricultural area. Here's another one, and a diagram of what that nest box might look like. So the important thing for barn owls is it is a large offset box with a hole that is off to the side. And so the young would predominantly be in this side of the nest box. It needs to be of proper height, and they take off from a little platform that you can add if you'd like. Otherwise, they will leave right out the hole there. And all of these nest box diagrams come from Nest Watch, which is a wonderful website that you can go to find the best size and shape of a artificial nest box for any species that takes well to them. And we'll make sure to include that link in the follow-up email that we send you. So don't worry about it, we'll send you an email. Unless you live in an agricultural area though, this is not likely to be a species that you really want to have in your area. For one reason, they're probably not going to take you up on it if you live in a really urbanized area. But the other is their nesting sites can be quite stinky, as we mentioned. So the next one is the eastern screech owl and the barred owl nest boxes. What you're seeing here is a box that has been mounted for a barred owl. So this is a mostly square box that is taller than it is wide, and it has a hole coming out the side of the box. Most of your traditional bird houses would have the hole coming out of the front of the box, but the barred owl does prefer having the entryway off to the side. For your eastern screech owl, it's going to be a much smaller box, but the hole is quite little and it is off the front. This is your typical birdhouse shape that most people are familiar with. You can ignore this little circle right here. This is if you were making a squirrel box. But these are the two different types of nest boxes you would look for a barred or eastern screech owl. Nest platforms are something that generally I don't recommend your average resident put in. But if you live in an area that has large trees that have a good spot to have a nest platform, essentially what you're going to build them is a large ice cream cone of sticks. And so you'll have a wire mesh for strength. You'll have a netting material to hold all the little bits in, and you will nest those together. And then you'll want to wedge it in the crook of a large tree. Now, great horned owls are messy nesters. And so you'll have a lot of loose material. They're not always the easiest to install if you're interested in doing so. But if it is something that is up your alley and you have the space for it, you don't want to have this right next to your home or a playground, for instance, in case it falls. Quite heavy, a couple 100 pounds. We can share the nest plans for this if you're interested. And then finally, you can enhance the ground habitat for a burrowing owl. I was unable to find a good diagram of what a T-perch is, but essentially it's any kind of wooden or plastic piping or pole that sticks up, a foot or two even, and then has a perch on top. In our agricultural areas, the burrowing owl is often seen perched atop fence posts and things of that nature. Essentially, you're just looking to give them an observation platform that they can look for predators on. And we have a great little video that I can show you where there's a T-perch installed next to a burrowing owl's burrow. And we'll look at that in just a second. One of the other things you can do is if you live in one of the urban areas that has a population of burrowing owls and you would like to enhance the habitat on your property, you can cut out a 2 to 3 foot diameter circle of sod and remove it so that the bare dirt is exposed. Go ahead and start digging out that burrow a little bit and then install a T-perch, and you are likely to be enticing an owl to come to your yard. But as a protected species, you need to keep things like pets and children away from that area. So in this video that we will watch a few moments of because they're so cute and I love them, you'll see right in the middle there, that is a T-perch made out of what looks to be old driftwood or old cut branches. And you can also see in the distance off the left there, there's an owl that is standing on what looks to be a PVC pipe, probably marking the outline of the burrowing area. So what you've got here are some young burrowing owls checking out the camera. They're not really sure about this thing, and as you can see, they're just full of personality. So right behind him, that is the T-perch, as I mentioned, and on the far distance to the left there's another perching structure. If you have these in your area, you will want to put PVC pipe out or flagging tape or something to indicate that people are getting too close to the burrowing owl's burrow there, and to keep lawn equipment out of the area. So this is a great video. I do highly encourage you to go to YouTube and check out additional videos of burrowing owls. They are just the cutest. All right. So in conclusion, I just wanted to reemphasize that owls are super important predators in our food web and in our ecosystem. They help balance the population of species like rodents and other small critters like birds and mammals, and they really help our ecosystem stay in balance. So these are great wildlife to have in urban and agricultural areas for those benefits. We have 5 species of resident owls in Florida year-round. They are listed on your screen. And the biggest things that you can do to help our owl population, besides telling everyone how amazing they are, is reducing your use of rodenticides or rodent poisons and instead looking for ulterior or alternative ways to reduce rodent populations if you have that problem. You can also provide habitat for owls in your area to help again with that rodent population. And with that, I'd just like to say thank you so much for tuning in today. I can't wait to do the Q&A session, but we need you to answer a quick post-webinar poll question for us, and this is for our reporting. So we'll go ahead and pull that up. Thank you, Lara. So if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to fill out this survey. These surveys are really important to Lara and my reporting at the end of the year to make sure that classes like this are available when we would like to offer them. So let us know how we did. Don't worry, don't be shy. These will not be shared with anyone in any way that they can identify who you are or what you submitted. So if you would take a moment to please answer those questions. For the before and after question, please note that the first question is asking how you feel about your level of knowledge now that you have watched the webinar. And the second question is how you felt about your level of knowledge prior to attending the webinar. And once you have finished your post-webinar poll, you can always open up your chat box and go ahead and submit some questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Shannon. That was a great presentation and overview of all of our owls in Florida. So I have been keeping an eye on the chat box, so please keep your questions coming in, and we'll give you guys, oh, there's only, most of you are already answered the poll, so we'll give a few more seconds on that, and then we'll jump right into Q&A. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to end the polling. Okay, and so also before we jump in, we do want to remind you this is the last of our webinars for this series, and we just thank you guys all for tuning in. If this was your first time, thank you. If you've tuned in for more than one, thank you so much, and we hope that you guys will take some actions based on our recommendations to learn how to coexist with wildlife. And we have just a reminder of some ways that you can do that. Obviously sharing information, right? It's only me and Shannon, but all of you guys have tuned in. And so if you can also help spread the word, we appreciate that. And again, just taking different actions to reduce negative conflicts, providing artificial habitat, which Shannon mentioned. And then again, just being excited about nature and sharing that with others. So I was able to answer many questions as they came in. So I'm going to start with some of the ones that are coming in now, and then we can go back to the others just so we can share the answers with everyone. So let's see here. So a question about screech owls asking if they prefer rodents or insects for food. Oh, you're muted, Shannon.
Thank you. So eastern screech owls prefer small prey. So that would be things like grasshoppers, earthworms if they're on the surface after a rainstorm, other insects that they can get a hold of, sometimes small birds, some lizards, things like that. So they're not going to go after a rodent. If you think about most, well, I try not to think about the size of most rats, but they're going to be the same size or bigger than an eastern screech owl. So it's not going to be a great prey item for them.
Great, thank you. And a question came in, so we went over the 5 species that are here, and somebody was asking if we have any owls that are migratory that come here to Florida.
Oh, that's such a great question. The answer is yes. We have a species, oh goodness, Lara, do you know which one it is? I think it's a northern, I can't remember, I'm sorry.
I can possibly look it up. We'll let Shannon maybe, I don't know, do you want to look that up while I look through the future questions?
Yes, I can do that because,
okay.
so yeah, yes.
The answer is yes. So, and I guess while you're doing that, I'll go over like a question that I already answered.
I'm ready, I found it.
Oh, okay, go for it.
Sorry, it is the short-eared owl. So the short-eared owl is actually not migratory, but they're very, very rare, and they're only in a small part of the state. So generally when I'm doing my education for Florida, it's focused on Central Florida, and that's why I don't normally include it in my talks. As far as migratory birds, I'm seeing that there are some owls that do come in either for a small part of the year or are just occasionally found here. And that would be the long-eared owl, the northern saw-whet owl, the snowy owl, and the flammulated owl.
Okay, and some other questions coming in. Someone was asking how to best see owls when it's dark outside.
Great question. Oh my gosh, this is such a good one. My best advice to you is find somewhere that has good habitat. So look for large trees, especially a park, preferably a park that you're allowed to be in after dark. So if it's a park that has, you know, gates in front of it and they close at sundown, that's not really the thing you're looking for unless they offer some type of night hike or things of that nature. But your neighborhood parks where there aren't gates and you can go after dark, what you'll want to do is you'll want to get there before sundown, set yourself up, bring some snacks. It's going to be a little bit, bring lots of bug spray. You want your vision to adjust to night. And so that can take as long as 45 minutes. That's why you want to get there before it gets super dark. And you want to be in an area that you know you've heard owls in before. You're not going to hear them if they're flying around. You're not going to hear them hunting most likely, but you're going to listen for those calls and try to focus in on where that sound is coming from, and you're more likely to see an owl. Like I said, the one that's in the park by my house, the only reason I know that he is there is because he flew in front of my car and scared me half to death one day, and he's always in the same tree. So as long as I get there before nighttime and my eyes adjust, I can see him. Another recommendation is call your local Audubon chapter. They likely know where in an area there might be a hot spot for seeing either one particular owl or is frequented by lots of owls. So call your local bird watching groups, your Audubon society, and maybe they have a beginner class where they'll take you with them. But those would be my best. You can tell I get excited about that.
That's good. That's what we told them to do, right?
Yeah.
Share your enthusiasm. So the next question is asking if owls are quite vocal?
Yes. Yes. You are way more likely to hear them than see them. So in areas that have great cover, great habitat, lots of prey, you'll hear lots of owls. If you go hiking at night, if you're camping, if you live in an area that has a lot of tree cover, they can be deafening. They'll be so loud and so frequent. So you'll hear barred owls calling back and forth to each other. You can use your phone and play a sound and get them all riled up and going. They are very vocal critters, and they have lots of different calls. We just played the most frequent ones today.
Yeah, and somebody had actually asked earlier, they're like, which owl is most likely to sound like a monkey? And I was like, that's the barred owl.
Yeah.
They are very vocal sometimes. So
very loud.
Okay, there's lots of good comments coming in, just thinking this webinar and us for the series. And then a question about nest boxes. Should they be cleared between seasons, and when is the best time to clean them?
Oh, that's a great question. That's going to be species dependent, and it's going to depend on what type of material you put in them. So if you recall, for barn owls, you don't need to put anything in there. They're going to fill it with all kinds of gross things on their own. Your screech owls, you can put some pine shavings in the bottom, and that can help them get excited about nesting. You'll want to clean it out after the young have fledged. So if you have a screech owl box in your backyard, you'll likely, when they take residence in it, you'll know it because you'll see them. They stick their little head out of their nest box every night, and it is the cutest thing. Mama and daddy are hunting for things to bring back to their young. They predominantly will lay eggs in early spring, Barn owls, for instance, lay their eggs in February in Florida most of the time. Unless you're in very South Florida, I might recommend cleaning out the nest box in the late fall. So September, October, but you just want to be extremely careful to make sure that nobody's currently home. So if you can, try and find out if anyone's home before you go in there. The Nest Watch website, the one that we're going to send out with the plans, you have to submit your email address. But after that, you're able to download nest box plans. And in those plans, it will include things like what direction to point the box, north, south, towards water, that sort of thing, how much space to give them. And I believe it says in there what you should put in the nest box to encourage nesting and if it should be cleaned out, when and how frequently.
Yeah, lots of things are species specific, so it just depends. Okay, and then next question is, how many eggs do owls usually lay?
Oh, that is also species dependent and geographically dependent, and likely the amount of prey in an area dependent. So for instance, barn owls can lay as many as 18 eggs per clutch, but 4 to 6 is totally normal. Most screech owls, I think, are about in that same 4 to 6 range. I actually can't recall off the top of my head for great horned or barred owls. And then burrowing owls, I think, and don't quote me on this, but I think they're closer to the 2 to 5 range, but species, geographic, and prey dependent.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, I was looking that up as I was answering some other questions. And the burrowing owl, it says anywhere from 2 to 12. And for like the the barred owl, it was 1 to 5. So it kind of seems like generally the larger the bird, the fewer the eggs. But again, like Shannon says, it's highly variable.
Yeah.
So
can you imagine trying to take care of 18 owlets? That seems overwhelming.
So, okay, we got 4 minutes left, so okay. We'll keep going. There's 2 more questions so far. Oh, and they keep coming in. Okay, so nope, I already lost my place. Oh, no, I'm right. Do owls carry any diseases?
Do owls carry any diseases? If they mean diseases that can be transmitted to humans, I'm not really aware of a large risk of transmission. So my answer would be not a high enough risk of transmission that it's something we warn people a lot regularly. If you are interested in dissecting owl pellets, we do recommend that you buy them from a science material or science outreach type company because they have sterilized them so that you don't have to worry about that. Do not recommend going out and collecting owl pellets for dissection unless you know how to protect yourself from things like fungal spores and viruses. So that would be a mask and gloves at minimum. So I would say I'm not aware of a specific disease that they can transmit, but in general, when we're teaching the public, all wildlife carry some diseases. How risky it is to interact with them is species dependent.
Okay, and then the next question was asking if owls drink water from ponds, lakes, etc.
You know, I've never actually thought about it. Do you have the answer to that, Lara?
I don't.
I've never actually thought about it.
I would imagine the answer is yes. But
yeah. I promise I will look that one up and I will try and send out an answer in the email that we send.
So, okay, then somebody was asking if any of these owls are found along the southeast coast. Yes,
all of them. So you can find all 5 of those species all the way down the southeast side of Florida. If you're super, super coastal, like beach coastal, they're likely to be less common because of there generally not being a lot of habitat there. It's usually pretty urban in southeast Florida, but anywhere there's enough habitat, you'll find these owls. They are found throughout the state of Florida.
So, and actually while you were answering that, I was researching on the Cornell Lab of Ornithology about the drinking, and it says that they get most of their water from their prey. They will occasionally drink from bodies of water, or like when they're bathing, they might like take a sip, but.
Gotcha. Well, then I don't feel quite so silly for not knowing the answer to that.
So yeah, we all learned something new. And okay, I think we'll do one last question. What makes owls fly silently?
Ooh, that's a good one. They're all good ones. I love questions. So when you think about a feather, think about a craft store feather or a feather that's been on a piece of clothing, even an artificial feather. I think I have a paintbrush nearby. I can use to illustrate this. So most bird feathers, so I've got two paintbrushes right here. I think you can see them. So this one's kind of rounded and it's very even, the bristles on this brush. You probably can't actually see this, but it's a very defined shape. Our owls, what their wings actually look like is a lot more feathered out. So each individual feather, the tips are kind of fuzzy. And so they're more like this, where instead of having a hard cut edge, they've got like a frazzled appearance on the edge. And what that does is it disrupts the wind when they're flying through it, and it reduces the amount of, what's the fancy science word I'm looking for? Because they've got that frizzled, uneven edge, it just allows them to fly more silently. That's a physics question, but the short answer is instead of having a smooth edge, they've got kind of like their feathers have a feathered edge.
Perfect.
Is that like, did that make sense? I hope so.
We can include, I'm sure there's some good like images and stuff to showcase that. So if we find a good resource too, we'll include that in the follow-up. I do recognize that it is now 1 minute after 3, so we want to respect your time. So Shannon, if you just want to click to the next slide and we'll do our wrap up.
I am,
I think that's the next one. Yeah. So just a reminder that our webinars will be up on our YouTube channel. We have updated the name of our YouTube channel to be anyway, we've just updated it. We're going through lots of changes as everyone is as we switch everything virtual. So it's now UF IFAS Extension, Pinellas County. And again, we'll send you guys the direct link, but the playlist has not only the webinars from this series, but all of our past webinars if you guys want to check those out and watch them on demand. And yeah, we will, be in touch via email as we have other opportunities that come up that you guys might be interested in. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in and sticking around this long, 2 minutes after. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your Memorial Day. And yeah, go out and help us spread the word and continue to learn more about Florida's awesome wildlife.
yes.
Thank you so much, Shannon.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you everyone who stuck around, especially those of you who stuck around through Q&A. We still have quite a bunch of you. So hope you all have a nice and peaceful rest of your Memorial Day weekend and a wonderful week ahead. So we'll see you guys later.